I'm here with Shelly Brander, and Shelly I've known for quite some time. Shelly's been a member of my Platinum Plus group and been part of the PLF community for probably 5 years at least, maybe longer. And Shelly has a new book coming out, and I got an advanced copy. It's called Move the Needle, and it was a great book. This is a great book for any entrepreneur, any creative, any maker out there. And so, Shelly, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so happy to be here. I always love to catch up with you.
So let's see the book. Let me see the book.
Uh, Here it is. You said this main title, Move the Needle, Yarns from an Unlikely Entrepreneur.
It looks beautiful. I just got the PDF that you sent over to me.
And there's your quote on the back cover.
What does
Number
it say?
one. What does your quote say? Well, I need my glasses for that. Here we go. It was a really good one. This is an adventure story of yarn, entrepreneurship, hustle, and family. Move the Needle overflows with passion, wisdom, and hard-won business and life lessons. Bam. I loved it.
Boy, yeah, and it really did sum up my experience of reading the book. So could you just tell us a little bit about who you are, your business, and the book?
Sure. Yeah. So I have a knitting business and I have a global yarn brand and I lead a movement to knit the world together. And I started a little yarn store 15 years ago and it's since grown into all of that. And my big break with everything with the yarn store exploding into a big online business was PLF. So that was about 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago. I'd never heard of an online course before, and I took PLF, and then the rest is history. So why I decided to write a book, because I've been busy. Obviously, we're busy running this company and all of the different parts of it. It's got a lot of moving parts. But one of the parts is I do something called Knit Stars, which is, I like to call it masterclass on steroids for knitters. So we fly around the world and film all these famous knitting celebrities, which is an actual thing. People never believe it, but it's an actual thing. Your son Dan has helped film in Norway and all over the world with us. But after actually our trip to Norway, I was so exhausted. We've been filming for 2 weeks and I had to get on a plane to fly back and I was too tired to knit, which is very rare. And I opened up my Audible and the first book there was Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. And I listened to it and I was like, I need to write a book. And that's how it started. So the reason is people ask all the time, they're always just so shocked that I could like make a living with yarn, right? And I wanted to help other creative people see that whatever your passion is, the weirder the better, you can turn it into, your life's work and, make a difference and grow it into a global movement. So that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, and I loved it. I loved it. And I love that the inspiration was Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott because that book is an amazing book.
So amazing.
Yeah, I love
So amazing. I need to reread it. It was like, it was the last thing on my radar to write a book, right? But she just spoke so eloquently about it. It reminded me because I actually started out my career. I studied to be an advertising person. My degree was in journalism and my career was first as a copywriter. And when I listened to that book, I realized how much I was missing writing. I was just missing that creative expression. I'd gotten so busy with all the parts of the business, just all of the moving parts and pieces. And I realized that the writing and the creative expression, just like knitting, is like what feeds me. And I needed to get back to that. So it was really like, I didn't have that big of a plan for exactly what the book was going to be about. I thought I wanted to tell my story. I didn't know how much of it. I didn't know how personal I wanted to get. And in that book, I believe that's where I got the idea to mind map the book. So it was really overwhelming, the thought of writing an entire book. When someone says, oh, just write 50,000 words, you're like, what? But for me, because I'm so visual, when I took a piece of paper and I started, just making circles and writing different topics and different stories for my life, I could start to see patterns. And that's when I started to get excited. And then from that into an outline. And then the daily practice, setting aside time every day to write. And, before I knew it, I was in it. And and I was loving it. I mean, I really love the process of pouring it all out. It was cathartic. I mean, you've written a book, you know what it's like. So
Right.
I just sank all the way back into what my, like, kind of my first love of writing.
I think of your book, and I think we've even talked about it. It's almost like you have two audiences for the book, and
Mhm.
one is like the maker, the creative people that are into knitting or any type of creative work like that. And certainly in the knit space, absolutely everyone's going to read it. But it's also, I think this is a book for entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
um, all the way through, because your life has been an entrepreneur ever since you got out of college, even, or probably before that. But
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah, and people have said, because of course all these early reviews have been coming in, because we've had, been shared it with some early readers, and the thing they keep saying is, it's not exactly a business book, and it's not an knitting book, it's a life book. And a lot of people have echoed that same comment, which feels really great. I mean, because that's what I was intending, right? So whatever, I didn't want to pigeonhole it, because I really believe all humans are creative, right? So whatever your creative passion is, like, this is a book that will help drive you to figure out what that is and put it first. Because I think it's really tragic that there's so many people that do the thing that they hate their whole life, so that someday when they retire, they get to do the thing they love, when they're what, 65, 70, when's that going to be? And I've known so many people like that. And I think especially after the year we've just been through, people have had so much time to reflect and really think, what is it that what does I love to do? Am I doing the thing that I really love to do? And for a lot of people, especially in the creative space, especially like the performing arts, I mean, that's been decimated, and they have to find a way to pivot. It's like they may feel like they have to do the safe thing. It's actually a great time to think about doing the thing that you really love. Like why not now? Why not take this time to pivot into the thing that you really like, that really feeds you, you know? So at first, it was like, oh my gosh, is this like the worst time ever to publish a book? We talked about moving the date, and I was like, no, this is like the best time ever for this book to come out, because I think it will really inspire people to put the passion first. And the world needs it right now. And the world needs hope. The world needs a story of inspiration. The world needs, a really improbable, crazy story of, like, if she did it, I could do it.
Yeah, I mean, pivot. You've just had some huge pivots in your life, from being extremely young and building a successful career in advertising and branding, starting your own branding agency, and then starting a yarn store. Like,
Sure.
hello, where'd that come from?
I'm still not exactly sure where it came from. Everyone thought it was so insane. I had 3 kids under 5 years old. The branding company is with my husband, Brent Brander. Like, I married the right guy, right, with the right name. And so we were very enmeshed. We were codependent with our business. And the thing is, I think partly because when my kids were born and had some issues and struggles, I was starting to kind of feel like, is this the thing I want to do the rest of my life? Like, even though it was creative and I was getting to write and I loved the storytelling and the production part of it, just in general, I felt like I was selling, we had Hard Rock and like Cox Cable and AT&T. And I'm like, am I going to sell cable TV the rest of my life? Like, what kind of legacy am I leaving with that? Like, we're a great ad agency, but how different is that? Like, how am I really doing something different that's going to leave an impact? I was feeling that. And I had learned to knit when I was 16 years old. And I'd always actually felt weird, for, like, I didn't know anyone my age that knit. And uh, I felt like I was isolated. I didn't know anyone else who got into it like I did. But from the minute that I learned, it was like this magical thing of, like, you've got sticks and string and you're making like actual fabric out of nothing. And I was just obsessed with it. So when this kind of crossroads came, I was knitting. I had a local yarn store that I went to, really nice lady, but it was the typical yarn store at that time, just very old fashioned, like what you would think of, right? Like scratchy wool and itchy acrylic and just like little old ladies in little cardigans, right? And but she was super sweet, and she was going to retire. She said, I'm going to retire and I think you should open a yarn store. And I was like, my first thing was like, no possible way. I have no time. You're crazy. I've got this branding business and I'm 3 kids, but it kind of sat with me. And it was one of those things that just kept whispering in my ear, and it was just like, I just be going about my day and it just kept whispering, like, hey, maybe, hey, maybe. And I try to push it down and it kind of like just kept bubbling back up. And so then I started to really think about it and I was intrigued. I thought, well, maybe I could make a more modern yarn store, maybe one like there's never been before. And maybe then I could franchise it because there was no franchise. That was my original thought. And so, okay. So then I didn't know anything about business. It was a journalism major. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to write a business plan, I got to find a friend or somebody. I've got to phone a friend, right? So I asked around at like my kids' preschool and I found a friend that had an MBA and I took him to get sushi. I don't think this part's in the book, actually.
I don't remember this part.
I took him to get sushi and I remember it really well because it's my first time to ever have edamame. And I was nervous and they ordered edamame and I like bit into the whole thing. I'm like, I didn't know you're supposed to, squeeze them out. And I'm like, pretending like that's the normal way, and I'm just, yeah.
I think at least 50% of us have had that edamame experience.
Really? Thank you. Because I've told that story and everyone always looks at me like I'm crazy. Anyway, so the guy was super patient and nice. And as it turned out, he was the perfect person because he worked in the oil business. And the guy that owned the shopping center that I wanted to be in, I knew that my first thing is I got to get a lease deal. And I wanted the nicest shopping center in town. And it was owned by this billionaire oil baron. And this shopping center was his little side baby, and this guy worked in the oil business. So he knew that guy. And so we put the lease offer together, sent it to the guy and didn't hear anything. And I called and they said, oh, we really don't have space available right now. But I could drive by and see that they did have space available. So I was like, okay, I'll call again, like a month later. I'm like, hi, do you have any space available? And they kept saying no. And I kept calling every month for 2 years. 2 years go by. And, I was busy. I had the branding, I had the kids. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it. It just won't go away from me. I can't let it go. I've got to give it one last Hail Mary. So I ordered cashmere yarn from New York City because I couldn't get it in Tulsa. And I made him a scarf that I thought a billionaire oil baron might wear. And I found out where he lived, which, was a little bit of stalking back then to figure that out. And I put a letter with it. The world needs a more modern yarn store. It needs to start in this shopping center. I dropped it off on Christmas Eve, wrapped it up, dropped it with the doorman. And the day after New Year's, I got the lease deal.
Wow.
And then I was like, holy crap, now I got to make a yarn store.
But it's just a story of persistence and finding another way of doing a little end around and finding the way.
And leaning into your creativity, because this is the thing. I think creative people so often undervalue what they've got, but really creative is absolutely the best thing you have. And the more that AI becomes a thing, the more, I say creative is the new currency. The more AI takes over everything else, creative is the one thing that it cannot do. And so I was like, what can I do that no one else can do? What can I do to make an impression? It's like, well, I can do this thing, I can knit. So, lean into it. And how can you use that? And everybody loves a handmade thing, it makes an impression. It's like, it's a human connection. And, it's just it's something beyond the usual, a letter, right? I've actually made it as couple scarves to reach out to a couple of my writing heroes. After writing the book, I've sent scarves to Seth Godin, which he said is the nicest thing in his wardrobe now. And Brene Brown, actually. That's another crazy story. I was on a yarn Zoom. I was on a Zoom with a bunch of yarn people, 100 people. And I said, hey, I want to make a scarf for Brene Brown because her books have really inspired me. I was like, I'm laughing. Like, does anyone know Brene Brown? And somebody raises their hand. They're like, my son lives on the next block from her and walks their dog every day by her house and they play tennis at the same club. I'm like, okay.
So, okay. How did you, tell real quickly how you went from a yarn store, a successful yarn store, a modern, very different yarn store, but went from that to the online world?
Yeah, yeah. So what happened was, I had franchised. I mean, started to do the multi-store thing. I almost ended up closing the whole business because I was really struggling with 2 stores. I went down to 1 store, and right after that happened, like things were, going better, but the biggest struggle was the seasonality of the yarn business. Everyone wants to knit in fall and winter, and then in spring, I would struggle, with the bills and try to scrape through until the next fall. And right about that time, a knitting friend of mine on Facebook liked Jeff Walker, some guy named Jeff Walker, something called PLF, right? Product Launch Formula. And I clicked on it and I started watching you. I'd never seen any online anything. I'd never taken an online course. I had no clue about any of it. I did have a little web store, but that was it. And then I assumed, because I didn't know better, that everybody that buys a course watches the whole thing and implements it, right? That's like, of course. So during that process, I came up with an idea for a membership. And at the time that wasn't really, box and bag memberships weren't really a thing yet. And so we launched a thing called Loops Club that was like an on-trend, modern yarn kit. And it took off. I think that first week was like $75,000. And it just like blew my mind, partly obviously the success, but more like, oh my gosh, like I could see a regular income plan, right? Like every month, like this will solve our seasonal problem. And then because of that, I ended up going to PLF Live, to your live event, just a few years ago. And I met someone who had done an online summit in calligraphy. And I mean, of all things, and she approached me about doing one together. I turned her down at first because I was like, there's no way, I had like way too busy. But we ended up making something called Knit Stars, like I said, which is, we did our first season. We just finished our 5th season of Knit Stars, and that has grown. That has taken everything really global and helped us connect. It's the coolest thing because it's connected all these knitters around the world and given them the connection that I didn't have when I was starting out as a knitter. And we built just super positive, inspiring business. And then also it's really up-leveled what the top designers and thought leaders in the business are paid, which means a lot. And just, I feel like up-leveled the quality and the whole business, of the whole knitting category, I can confidently say now. So that means that's really super rewarding. So, so yeah, Knit Stars is now the biggest portion of our business that we have. We still have a flagship store. We just signed a lease on a 6,000. No, that's not really official yet, but now everyone knows, right? 6,000 square foot. We're going to do like an experiential retail to be the flagship. But Loops Club's still going, so it's largely online now. The vast majority of the business is online, which is amazing. So yeah, it's been transformed.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap this up, but I want to encourage everyone to move the needle, because what you've heard is just a tiny bit of a crazy, amazing entrepreneurial adventure story. And just one, could you just say a few words about, because the theme I saw throughout it is this, Shelley, I mean, I already knew you were a badass because we've known each other. You've been in my mastermind. You wouldn't be in the mastermind if you weren't a badass. You would never gotten invited in. So we know each other, but still I was like, oh my gosh, this woman just does not take no for an answer. And she just figures out a way to make things happen. And we could maybe say you manifest stuff, but really what I saw is you just knocking down walls. And I know sometimes people think that's like, that makes you superhuman, but could you just speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, it definitely does. And in fact, part of why I got super personal and raw in the book, like I probably more than I maybe should have, is I wanted people to see that like I've had some huge, crazy obstacles that have popped up. And I wanted people to know like it can look really shiny and perfect, from the outside. It can look like the 15-year overnight success, right? And I wanted them to know, no, this is work and it's a challenge, but it's really fun. And literally anybody, if I can do it with yarn, anybody can do it. And that's the underlying message. So yeah, it's just like, get started, right? Just take that first step. And then it's the old one foot in front of the other, from the Rankin and Bass video. It's and you will get knocked down, and you have to know you're going to get knocked down. But then when you get up, it's so much sweeter. And when you get there, it's so much sweeter. And can I read you? Because the reviews are coming in. And I had a review coming today and it just cracked me up. So I want to share this with you. We can wind it up. Okay, I just thought this was hilarious. This book will get you off your butt to do what you've always dreamt of doing, or not. And if not, you should go work in a factory. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If you have a creative entrepreneurial bone in your body or thought in your head, settle down, read Shelley's book, and be inspired. From the Mad Men style drama of her early career to lasting and growing team building, Shelley's realizing her dream of knitting the world together. Her book full of stories to move you to action is certainly not limited to the knitting world. Her principles were applicable to any creative person with a dream. And if you do not have that dream, Shelley's book is a fun, interesting read. You might just find out that there is a creative idea lurking below the surface. I'm like, man, it doesn't get any better than that.
No, it doesn't. Let's see the book cover once again so people can go find it on Amazon. Move the Needle.
Put in Move the Needle, Shelley Brander. It's climbing the chart, so it should pop up for you, hopefully.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thank you, Jeff. That was awesome.
You're amazing.
So are you.